A is for abortion. That's how a hallway display of the ABCs began in a Fairfax County high school. You can imagine how the rest of the alphabet went. It only got worse from there. Meanwhile, President Trump has begun dismantling the Department of Education. How will that affect Virginia? And last but not least, we'll bring you the latest on what Governor Youngkin has signed and vetoed so far. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. We've got a lot to cover today, but before we get started here, I just wanted to remind you, if you want people in your sphere of influence to learn what we're talking about, to learn why we should care about all these life, family, freedom issues happening in our state, then make sure you let them know about how to listen on our Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube, that's Speak Up Virginia playlist, and also on our audio-only platforms. With Apple and Spotify, people can listen that way. And if you are listening on those, make sure and give us that 5-star review if you like what you're hearing, because that's how our program gets out there to more people. And we need as many people as possible to know what's really going on. So with that said, Victoria, I want to launch right in. We've got an important topic to cover with this monumental action from President Trump to start dismantling the Department of Education. There's been no other president willing to take that on. So I'm looking forward to being able to pick your brain on that. But first, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, we are continuing to see this craziness, this woke craziness coming out of Fairfax County.
Yeah, pretty much if you ever read anything that you kind of can't believe is coming out of a school, it's usually Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun. It's one of those. So this time it's Fairfax. It's West Fairfax, West Springfield High School. Yeah. And basically, I guess it was International Women's Day is what gave them the excuse. But
that's their excuse.
Yes, that's their excuse. So remember, and this is a great warning for parents. It doesn't have to be an official part of the curriculum. You got to be eyes on your school at all times. So this was just a reason to make a display. And apparently some teachers decided to make a display of the ABCs as if you need those in high school. Side point. I'm not so sure how many high schools. If we're at the point where we're teaching ABCs in high school, we probably need to address some other things. But nevertheless, what the ABCs were was the real problem. It was a bunch of leftist garbledygook. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, where do we even start here?
Give some examples.
Yeah, we mentioned A is for abortion.
Wait, and the visual, I guess we'll put this up, but the visual is a coat hanger, so we'll talk about that.
Who thought this was a good idea? I think there's what looks like a positive pregnancy test. I mean, just terrible, really.
And if you're going to put a visual of abortion, it's interesting they can never actually put the visual of abortion, right? Because that actually might help people understand what's really going on. But instead, we put, that this will be something illegal or whatever if we don't, whatever.
I don't even know where to begin with all this. I mean, we've got H is for hope, and that might be good, but then it has an image of Kamala Harris, not really bipartisan.
Yeah, imagine if they had put on the M, MAGA, and it was Trump. What would have happened? But we can put hope and make Kamala the symbol of hope.
All right.
And nobody's supposed to complain.
Since you mentioned M.
Okay. All right.
The only real mention of men on here is men for mansplain. That's what they have.
Crying out loud. Okay. How many high schoolers need to focus on things like mansplaining? I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. And it's just, again, that men are this toxic thing that we have to, that women have to be on guard about how they're speaking in a classroom or whether they're talking down to you or,
and this is a hallway display. It's not like it's tucked away.
There's no content being taught with it, meaning there's not even context put around any of these. You get to
as far as I know, it's just, but it's a hallway display. So how are the boys feeling walking by with, like they're toxic?
Well, and we have to bring up that this is in the middle of, this whole display is in the middle of this move by our president and others to kind of get the DEI out of schools. And yet we're still putting mansplaining as if white men are the top of the oppression ladder or whatever that is. So that's a problem.
I'll mention a few others here.
Yeah.
P for patriarchy.
Yeah, again.
T, then we get into the LGBTQ stuff. T is for trans woman. Q is for queer. Queer.
Yeah.
Then we do have J for justice, which you might think might get back to normalcy, but no, it reflects the Statue of Liberty holding a female sign instead of the torch, and there's all these kind of random flags, the Palestinian flag, transgender flag, other.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Like, we're bringing in the international politics with the Palestinian flag, and you put the Statue of Liberty, but you put something else rather than the torch. And it kind of, actually, I just was watching some protest the other day, I guess yesterday, that somebody popped up images, it's the upside down flag. Are we going to take all of our images and distort them to try to make some statement against the United States? And I feel like they do that when they do the Statue of Liberty.
Well, when the school was asked about this, they tried to justify it, as you said. Supposedly this is done for Women's History Month, but they also said, they're saying it was a student-led history project, part of an elective course, but there's so many.
The students weren't submitting this as their homework, and they put it on display for the whole school to have. So even if a student submits something that's propaganda, it's not intended to then be displayed like you're supposed to receive it and intake it. Does that make sense?
Well, also, it could have been such a more time to value our history. Like, you could do A is for Amelia Earhart, or
there's a million great things.
Supreme Court justices, there are actually ways
Amy
to
Coney
honor.
Barrett could have been ABC
Exactly.
right there.
Perfect. Perfect. It's just very partisan, which
Which I think Ginsburg was. Did I see one of these was a picture? But
did we get Ginsburg up there?
I think Ruth Bader was one of them. I may be wrong, but I think I remember seeing that. So it's like, they only can take the left-wing women. They can't even imagine. It kind of reminds me, honestly, of when you had the African American History Museum and Clarence Thomas didn't get even a spot on the wall. This is what they're doing. They selectively edit out all conservative images, voices, and this is why our kids are getting, it is indoctrination at that point. If you can't fair and balance, put everything up, and I sound like Fox News isn't that they're fair and balanced. I'm not Fox News, and I don't necessarily think they're always fair and balanced, but you know what I mean? It's one of those, how can we expect that our kids are going to be able to review things and accurately analyze and learn how to think if all we shove at them on displays is left-wing ridiculousness? It
kind of reminds me, I think it was in Albemarle where they had the elementary schools doing the ABCs. Weren't they reciting these woke ABCs?
Yes.
And now we've moved it to high school. Now we're,
I really am literally just pondering the idea that anybody thought ABCs in high school was appropriate. I'm actually just more hung up on, we are really at we know we're not passing reading rates very well, but
that's the other thing, spending time on this kind of thing when we know that we're down in the standards, that we are at a very concerning level with basic reading proficiency.
And they're under investigation. They're one of the 5 counties that the president is looking into because they seem unwilling to abandon the DEI, which this is just another example of clearly they are not willing to do, girls' sports are not willing to go in the flow that the president has said federal dollars should go. So we already know that. We know this is the school that wanted to have FLE teach LGBT things down to the lowest possible grade. So it's interesting because I actually, when I heard how young they wanted to teach all the concepts related to LGBT, I was literally envisioning, okay, we're going to have these books, My Two Mommies, and all these things in these young grades, but I didn't even think about ABC displays that could be this bad. And so I think parents who have been concerned about this is just sort of the visual or the symbol of all that could go wrong if you start moving this stuff down even lower into grade levels. So
really good point. All right. Meanwhile, Trump is shaking things up again with taking these first steps to dismantling the Department of Education. So, Victoria, I want you to tell us what we should think about this, but let's just listen to this clip of him speaking right before he signed this latest executive order.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all. And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them, but everybody knows it's right, and we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education in this country, and we haven't for a long time. And we're pleased to be joined today by the woman who I chose because she's an extraordinary person, and hopefully she will be our last Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon.
All right, Victoria, help us understand what's going on here. And do you think we can see the impact of this in Virginia? Will this result in less time being wasted, less resources being wasted on things like woke ABCs?
I mean, I think the starting point is we have to look at what is the Department of Education. And to be totally honest, and maybe there's some viewers that can relate to me, if you're young enough, you've only ever sort of been around, well, there's been a Department of Education. I thought it kind of always existed. So I feel a little like there was a period where I had to actually learn, like, no, this was actually instituted way late in our history and hasn't been around that long. And then you look at its functionality, and yes, many of us think of the Department of Education as, if you've got college students, this is where college loans are coming from. You think of it if you have special needs kids, but reality apparently is very different as what the Department of Education was doing. And the president is rightly zoning in and saying, I see that all this mess that I'm trying to clean up, the DEI stuff, so much of that is coming from the Department of Education, and the education dollars we're intending to spend on actual reading, writing, math, down to the classroom. They aren't getting to the actual classroom. And so he's rightly identifying a problem that has to be addressed. Is it radical? It feels radical, for sure.
Yeah. Well, bottom line, if you look at the trajectory of from when the Department of Education came in and the spending and performance, it has done nothing the performance has not improved.
It's really hard to look at these opposite lines. So money goes up, actual proficiency goes down. So how do you look at those lines and think this is working? You can't honestly think it's working.
And to your point on the DEI stuff, I get the sense, is this correct, that these threats coming at our local schools for defunding if we don't submit to transgender ideology and the DEI stuff, we're going to defund your school if you don't bow down to this, is that coming through the Department of Education mechanisms?
It certainly appears so, and it appears that tons of the funding of how we train teachers and all this gooky left-wing stuff comes out of there. I mean, they actually, I read an article about $100 million that was supposed to go to actually university level, and it actually ended up going straight to K-12 teacher training on all this mess. And that was just $100 million. There's articles about $600 million going to DEI. I mean, there's the money that is being put into the indoctrination part is really significant. And so what Trump's trying to do is come up with a radical solution. Now, we have to remember, he can't actually, without the help of Congress, completely abolish. You can't just, with the stroke of a pen, abolish the Department of Education. You can move things around. You can get it down to what are the actual required mandates for that department. And so that's really what's going on, is he's going to do everything he can to abolish it. Congress would have to come alongside and endorse that. And then really, I think people are, you're hearing all the rage from the left about the functionalities that we do care about. So the left isn't claiming, oh, you got to keep the Department of Education because we need all of our indoctrination, which is really what they should be saying. But what they're actually saying is, no, we need the Department of Education because we need FAFSA, Pell Grant, like all these loans that come through. We need the special ed stuff. But the administration's being clear, those functions are absolutely staying. There should actually be no interruption. I mean, it's hard to imagine things won't be interrupted because you're cutting tons of employees. So I think it's fair to say, of course, there's going to be bumps along the road and how this exactly shakes out and where. But you can federal lending doesn't have to be in the Department of Education. It can go right back to the Treasury. I mean, there are places you don't have to eliminate functions to put them back where they belong in order to leave no room for the DEI stuff.
Yeah, and what stands out to me, well, first of all, you're saying to really finish the job, it would take an act of Congress.
I think to make it permanent and yeah.
Is that possible anytime soon?
I mean, this Congress seems really verbally willing to work with the president. So we'll see. The Speaker of the House seems very interested in pushing the kinds of bills but there's always, can you get to the numbers, right? Like we have narrow margins in the House. So.
And we see they're gonna bring out all of their firepower.
They're showing up at town halls. If your congressman has had a town hall, they're trying to interrupt it. So the congressmen have had to kind of the Republican congressmen at least have had to kind of change the way they're trying to speak to their constituents. So it's a little messy right now.
There's been some inflammatory, inflated language. I saw Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries was saying that President Trump was taking a chainsaw to public, this visual, and that it was going to harm millions of children. Is that gross hyperbole? What is your response to that?
I mean, sure. Is there a way that you could try to do this in the very detailed scalpel kind of way where you really go in, you go, okay, I'm going to cut this little program, and you examine a little more, then you're going to cut this. The problem with that is when you've had people in the past say they're going to do that, it just never works, and not enough goes. It doesn't. 4 years is not long enough, and one by one, it's hard politically as a strategy. You have to defend each and every program and fight for each cut. So honestly, yes, it feels a little like a chainsaw. I don't think it's wrong to say, wow, this feels pretty radical. It feels radical even to people who support the concept that it's a radical way of doing it. Is it extreme? I mean, that their hyperbole is. Yeah, it is politics. Everybody, uses the analogy that makes the greatest sort of visual impact for somebody. But I think I think there's a lot of people who are willing to give the president a shot at this because we know nothing has worked. Education is failing. Like, you're going to have to do something radical. And I think that's what most people that are supporting this, they might not know what all the impact is, but they're kind of going, we got to do something.
Well, and that's the thing. I would take issue with his statement, harms millions of children, because if you look at the reality, like we were talking about, it has not done the main job raising academic scores, proficiency, people to be prepared in society to read, write, and do math.
That is the point.
But at the same time, it's failing in that job and being used as a strong arm to force agendas on our local schools. So I feel like it's not doing job and it's being a strong arm man.
Yeah, and I think local governors ought to be pretty supportive because it should put more control back into the state, back into the locality, and hopefully more dollars. I mean, the goal is, can we get more dollars to the classroom? This has been an issue at the state level, at the federal level. I mean, I remember a bill we put, and this sounds crazy, but literally there was a bill we had years ago just to say, for every dollar we spend on education, can we get 60, I can't remember how much, basically 61 to 69% cents into the actual classroom. Like, because it all gets stuck. It gets stuck in grants and loans and training and administration, and it doesn't actually impact the kid that's trying to learn in the room and the teacher who needs all the resources they need to do that.
Yeah, and to that point, most of our local schools are getting funded, or most of the funding to our local schools is coming from states. Yes. So you only get 10 to 14% from federal.
Right.
So do you feel like if we actually make significant progress in this, it is going to have actual impact in our local schools, that there will be somehow more empowerment to put that funding more toward the kids?
I sure hope so. And I think our governor is basically making comments like, look, I'm generally supportive. He's everybody is sort of, we got to see how it all plays out. But I think he's thinking, this could be helpful. This could put us more in the driver's seat. And if we're honest, our education in Virginia is not where it needs to be. And there was a fairly long season where people weren't being really forthcoming with the numbers. They didn't really want to say it's not going, because no politician wants to own that the education isn't going well. If you've been in office for 5 seconds, you're responsible for it. And so I'm just glad we do have, I think, in Virginia, leaders who are willing to say these numbers are not acceptable for our kids. So they're willing to be open-minded about what the federal government's doing, because everybody's got, it's got to take everybody to fix this thing. Now, we would argue we need educational choice. We just continue to say, look, the public school system trying to meet the need of every single child, and that specific school that you are zoned to because of your zip code, trying to meet the uniqueness of every child, that's that's an undoable task. And so anyway, there are I think President Trump also has that vision for how do we free up dollars to follow students where they can actually achieve. So if we could get these things working, it would do wonders.
Well, there is some good news, believe it or not, coming out of the Fairfax County School District in the middle of all this. Tell us about what's going on with that.
Yeah, we're really pleased, and I would say I'm surprised. Fairfax County, as I mentioned, was moving forward with the Family Life Education Committee. They have a committee that is created to deal with the curriculum matters, and they were moving forward with essentially trying to push this LGBT stuff down into the very youngest kinds of grades. Yeah. And it appears that they have said we are going to actually abolish that committee in its entirety, which then, of course, stalls and changes the methodology if they are going to try to do anything. So it's clear that this was a result of backlash. You want to talk about the sort of what the parents did and how this came about?
This really is amazing because, with us having a Speak Up Fairfax team out there, we hear from the parents how oppressed the environment is when parents try to speak up on what should be common sense, that we should not be pushing adult transgender agendas, ideology. I mean, you'll remember hearing from that poor father where his son, just goes into
for Veterans Day.
Yeah, hears from a transgender person about aspects of their transition. I mean, this just should not be happening in those youngest grades. And then we have, as you said, this advisory committee trying to push this through. And I will just mention also what was so amazing, Victoria, is that they had done a community survey.
And it said?
Yeah, it showed, I think it was like 85% of parents were opposed to this.
And then they were still going to move forward,
and
right?
they still move forward as if there was no feedback at all. It's really incredible just how brazen it was. The district was with ignoring parents and allowing this advisory committee, which they, I think, recommend or appoint the people on this committee. Yeah. So there wasn't real
wasn't
input.
like it was like our kind of people on the committee actually giving real input.
So parents started speaking out. There were faith-based groups. There were members of our Speak Up Fairfax team, and really the biggest star of all turned out to be Kaylee, this beautiful mom, mother of two in Fairfax, and she spoke at our Mama Bear Day event at the Capitol, where she actually called out Fairfax County for ignoring parents. And I think we're just going to put a picture up here of her.
What was great about her video is it went viral. I mean, millions and millions of people saw it, and then Fox News had her on. So her message really carried from just one press conference out to really build impact.
Really amazing. It reached over 6 million people. I think it's still circulating out there, and that landed
It's because her cute little boy is in her arms, too.
That landed her an appearance on Fox News. And so, this is all happening at a time where President Trump had announced these federal investigations, or really, I guess it wasn't him making the announcement, but his Department of Education through its Civil Rights Department announced a federal investigation into 5 Nova area schools, including Fairfax County, because they were not complying with his executive orders saying stop pushing men into sports, into locker rooms, stop the indoctrination, the radical indoctrination, whether it's DEI or the transgender at these young grades. They have to stop that or not receive federal funding. And so there's investigations going on, and I really think it was a combination of multiple things, starting with this pressure from Kaylee. She didn't plan for that to reach 6 million people.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think the fact that people felt that video just picked up on everything they were feeling, and so they watched it, they shared it, they spread it, and then the board starts feeling that pushback the parents start giving.
Yeah. So there was the pushback from the parents, and then it was all happening at the same time as some high-profile national things like President Trump's address to Joint Congress, the historic presidential address.
Where he said there is just male and female, and God made you perfect. We talked about that on this.
Yeah, and he highlighted parents dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
So that address happened, I believe it was a week before this committee was expected to vote this through, pushing this through the youngest grades.
And it was scheduled. I mean, that committee was scheduled to meet, just days before they decided to abolish it. I mean, they kind of let it run right up until the second they were about to make the change, I guess. Yeah,
so what happened is the Fairfax County School Board had its regular March meeting, and just took this surprise vote to completely abolish this committee. And that was a surprise retreat.
Yeah, absolutely. So big win for parents. And in Fairfax, any win is a huge win because, as you said, it's such an uphill. They just seem so non-responsive or unresponsive, I guess is the correct word, but to parents. And then, I think parents I hope that we're motivated by this. I hope that we see this and we go, it can be done, even when it feels like it can't be done, even when we've had lots of times they've ignored us, even when they looked like they were ignoring the survey of the whole county that they chose to do themselves. I just hope it's a real inspiration. Now, the cautionary tale is that we always have to keep our eyes, even when we get a win, it's not one and done. It is a long-term battle. Yeah. And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, there's a lot of ways that they can constantly push this stuff. So parents, this is your win. Now take the win and stay vigilant.
Exactly.
Is that fair? Stay vigilant.
Yeah, because
especially in Fairfax County.
Yeah, the way they justified abolishing this committee is that they were saying, well, all of the other curriculum committees don't operate this way with this special advisory committee, and so we're just going to put this process under the superintendent like all of the other curriculum. And so now parents there are going to really need to watch how the superintendent is doing this with FLE, Family Life Education. This is coming under the FLE, Family Life Education, Sex Education areas is how they're categorizing it. And so the question is, are they going to be transparent with that? Are they going to listen to parents moving forward? So we got to keep this up.
And also encourage your kids to be really open with you about what they're seeing in these schools. I mean, we need to hear from, because again, when it's not curriculum, when it's showing up on a display in the hallway, the only way we're going to, hear that, the only way they're going to feel pressure from parents is if parents know what's actually happening in the school district.
I think that is the most important takeaway from today is keep showing up and speaking up, because like when Kaylee showed up, we invited her to speak at our press conference, Mama Bear Day press conference. She doesn't know that that's going to go viral. No one did. She's expecting just a few people to hear this. And that's the thing, is you don't know what exactly is going to resonate, how God's going to use those moments. And that's why we just got to be faithful. We just got to keep showing up, speaking up, and then let God work. Let Him use what you're offering to be the salt and the light in your community, for your community. Well, on that note, let's hear Kaylee's latest update, because she just did kind of a victory lap little video on what just happened. So let's hear from her.
This video of me went viral, and this is what happened as a result. I was at Mama Bear Day talking about elementary schools teaching little kids about gender studies without the community's support. Then 6 million views on my videos, Fox News calls, parents everywhere were saying, "Thank you for speaking up." Well, guess what? After a study where 85% of Fairfax County parents said no to gender studies for elementary school kids and were completely ignored, change is happening. Last week, they canceled the entire committee that has been pushing these lessons on our kids. Of course, it wasn't just my video with President Trump's speech and a federal investigation of our county, but the board finally got the message. This is about parents having a say in what our kids learn and when they learn it. And the lesson is that when we speak up, change happens. Let's stand together and make common sense go viral.
I think she just proves that actions matter.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, speaking of actions, I did want to get the latest on Governor Youngkin, because, we had told our listeners that he has this deadline at the end of March, which has now passed, to take action on some 900 bills that were sitting on his desk. And he had 3 choices. He could veto, sign, or amend. Do we have any news yet on anything he's done at this point? Because we're speaking on the day that we're expecting to hear big news on this. So what do you got so far?
Yeah, this is the hard thing. It hasn't quite all dropped yet. We're hearing rumors that he has something like 150 bills he's going to veto and about a similar number he's going to amend. That's good, because we want to know that he didn't like most of what came to his desk, because most of what came to his desk came from a liberal legislature. So we actually, the higher that number is, the better it is in my book. And we had asked for a lot of vetoes and a few amendments. So what we're really waiting to see is how they match up. The one that we do have that he did announce, so there's 1 or 2 that he did announce. The first one that he announced, that's really the lead item on our big agenda this year, was the parental rights bill that allowed parents the opportunity to have full access to their child's medical records. We mentioned at the time this shouldn't have been any big deal, should have already been law, but we had a problem with electronic portals. And so he has signed that. It is going to go into effect. Just to remind people, most bills take effect July 1. So when you're hearing about this stuff, typically the full implementation of these things can be felt July 1. If you have a problem with your doc between now and then, though, I would imagine you can let them know this is the new law, so get on with it.
That is huge. Yeah. I think that's a huge victory. Yeah. And so, yes, I just want to reiterate, the next time you go to your doctor and that doctor tells you can't get into your child's online portal without them letting you in, false.
Exactly.
Hold up one of those false signs.
Like from the House State of the Union. That would be great. One other bill I'll just mention, because it's of interest to some folks, that has been signed and he did a big event around, was this idea that we're no longer going to put artificial dyes in food in school lunch plans. This is something a lot of parents wanted. This is a big deal. So that has also happened and is signed and will be implemented. Obviously, I would assume, again, next school year, probably not literally immediately, because menus are planned and all of that. But again, it's good to see him moving with kind of where the parents have been pushing. And so we'll continue to see if that's the rest of this, where this all goes. I would say that if we get some kind of update, I would definitely say we got to bring in Todd and try to clip it into this, because I really do think people, we'll see between this moment now and when we have to kind of hand it to you all so you can see the podcast. Maybe we'll get some updates. Maybe we'll try to drop in a little more information.
All right. Thank you, Victoria. Well, I will just wrap up with letting you know that we are just before the Virginia March for Life, April 2nd. So if you haven't signed up yet, make sure you go to our website, familyfoundation.org, and get signed up. And we have buses in several communities taking people to the march. So make sure you check out that bus list. Well, Victoria promised you that if we had last-minute updates on actions the governor had taken, whether it was a veto or signing something important or an amendment, that we would bring it to you as soon as possible. And the good news is we do have some updates. So I wanted to bring Dr. Todd Gackey, our Vice President of Policy and Government Relations. Welcome, Todd.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Today has been interesting for Todd because he has been closely examining all of the actions that the governor has released that's coming out, on your computer. Your face has been glued to the computer every time I walk by. So thank you for being here to give us the scoop.
Yeah.
And so, this is the to the minute that we have at the time of this taping. Now, you may hear of some more big things coming out after this goes out, but this is what we got so far. So I just want to start with the FACE Act because I know a lot of our listeners, that's something they really care about. Yeah. And, just to give people a quick frame of reference, the FACE Act, you may remember at the national level, is what was used to put some of these peaceful elderly people, sentence them to prison for simply trying to do sidewalk counseling or peaceful praying outside an abortion clinic. And President Trump pardoned those people. But here in Virginia, our General Assembly tried to put through, at least the leaders of it, a state-level version.
Yeah.
What's the good news?
Yeah, the good news is it was vetoed by the governor. So Senate Bill 1324, carried by Senator Surville, has officially been vetoed. So we can peacefully pray and protest and counsel and help women find an alternative to abortion outside of these abortion facilities. So this is a great win for freedom of speech and our ability to advance pro-life messages.
Yeah, because as you said, this bill tried to criminalize. So he's drawn a line through that. So all right, next one, marijuana.
Vetoed. So he is following the same pattern as he did last year. That is Governor Youngkin. He's been a stalwart on this issue, standing up for families. So he issued a veto statement, an incredible statement, once again, explaining the harms of marijuana and why we should not put a retail market in place and commercialize marijuana. So this is another big win, and we're just very thankful he stays strong on this issue.
All right. Pot shops on every corner vetoed for this year. Yes. All right. Now, there was an interesting thing that you mentioned to me with Sage's Law. Explain that real quick.
Yes. So legislation this year did not even get heard in the General Assembly. So our team looked for legislation that could potentially be available for an amendment to incorporate Sage's Law language. And so we made some recommendations to the governor's office.
All right, real quick. What's Sage's Law?
Yeah, Sage's Law is sort of the bill that we've been advancing here in Virginia, or championing in Virginia, that would make sure that parents are informed if their child is social transitioning in school, and to make sure the counselors are not having conversations with minor children without their parents being notified or even participating in the counseling. And so the governor has issued an amendment to a bill, House Bill 1678, that otherwise just deals with notifying parents about the safe storage of firearms and prescription drugs. This adds language that says, in addition to that, you're going to notify parents if their child is social transitioning so that you can have important conversations with your children and make sure that they're healthy and safe.
All right, I love that one because they didn't even give a hearing on efforts to make sure parents are notified, included, if the school is encouraging these kids without you as parents knowing about it, if they're experimenting with their gender at school, a different gender identity. And here we have a bill go through that's just, parents need to talk to their kids about prescription drugs and guns, but it's okay if they hide it from, gender identity that's life-altering. So the governor's calling them out on that with this change. So that's an amendment. Okay. there was a good bill that you guys had a hand in. Oh, Victoria and I talked about this earlier.
Oh, the parents' access to online medical records. That's signed into law. That's a great bill, great piece of legislation that was carried by Delegate Hillary Kent in the House and Senator Christy New Craig in the Senate. And we, from the very outset, we helped kind of identify a problem area that needed to be fixed, and legislators were willing to take this on and were great advocates for the bill. And now the governor signed it into law.
So that is law.
This is a huge win.
Starting July. All right. So I want to give real quick a kudos to your team, Todd, for your work. A lot of people don't know this on that specific legislation, and also in your team's ability to suggest amendments that at least one case so far has happened. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
All right. Let's talk about some areas of disappointment where we were hoping the governor would be a little bit more of a stopgap.
Yeah. And it deals with gambling. And so the governor has vetoed an amendment to the budget that the General Assembly passed that would have required a referendum to have a Rosie's show up in Henrico County, specifically off of Staples Mill Road. And there's a lot of backstory behind this.
Yeah.
But there was one site that was planned. That didn't work out. So the new owners of this Rosie's decided to have one on Staples Mill, which is in a residential area.
And part of the backstory is that people don't want it, right? It's pretty clear.
Yeah, and so the people, they had a town hall actually in December, and people in Henrico came out and voiced very strongly their opposition to this. And so the governor has gone in and has removed an amendment or vetoed an amendment that would have required a referendum to give the people, the citizens of Henrico County, the opportunity to accept or approve or disapprove of the Rosies, and so it's really disappointing because for those everyone knows that we're very much in opposition to any gambling expansion, whether it's sports betting, casinos. But if something is moving forward, we want to make sure there's at least a provision in there that gives the people a chance to speak out on it. And by taking this away, you're taking away the opportunity for Henrico citizens to speak out.
Because it has an impact on families, and we want families to have a voice on that, and it's unfortunate that the mechanism for having a voice has been taken out. That's disappointing. All right. Do we know anything about amendments to the so-called right to contraception that involved abortion causing drugs?
So at this moment, there has been amendments made to the bills. However, the language of the amendment is not up on LIS, on the database. Okay. And it's kind of like watching paint dry, okay? Yeah. We've had to sit here and watch this stuff slowly trickle in. So we're waiting to see what that language looks like. Yeah. If I were to guess, I would think that he's following the same pattern that he did last year, which is make an amendment to these bills, and then the General Assembly comes back and either accepts or rejects. And in the case last year, they rejected the amendments to put in place religious liberty protections, parental rights protections, to strip out the abortion-causing drugs piece. Okay. And then what he did last year is when they rejected the amendments, then he vetoed the legislation. If I were to guess, it seems like he's following that same process. All right. But again, we're waiting to see what the language looks like at this point.
Okay. Yeah, because last year it kind of turned into a showdown between the governor and legislators, whether if they weren't going to accept his amendments, then he vetoes it. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. But all right, so what do people do if they want to take action on everything you just mentioned?
Yeah, so we're gonna have an action page banner up where they'll be able to click on that. They'll go to a page where we'll have a lot of these bills, all of these bills that you can take action on, either asking your legislator to approve the veto or to approve the amendment. And in the case of the gambling, the Rosies, we're going to be asking them to override his veto of that. Okay. So there will be various actions. It'll all be laid out and tell them, show them what they need to do.
Right. So familyfoundation.org, look for an action page that they are going to be updating. Because I should explain that now that the governor has taken actions, all of the representatives are going to come back to the Capitol on April 2nd, and they will vote whether to override his vetoes or accept them, And the same thing for the amendments, whether to accept those or
Yeah.
reject. So it's important that you weigh into your representatives right now. And just to kind of go through that again, so FACE Act, tell your representatives to definitely support that veto, support the marijuana, pot shop on every corner veto, support the SAGES Law amendment, and I guess there'll be language where they can find
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we are contradicting what the governor has
Yeah.
done that you want to ask the representatives to override is the Henrico gambling.
The referendum.
Yeah, referendum. So that's a real quick summary in a nutshell. Yeah, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, well, we'll be updating everyone as soon as more information comes out. So we'll have our legislative update page up on the website, as well as the action page where they can go and take action on this.
So stay tuned. I know you're sending emails out as well. So thank you again for your hard work on all this.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. Make sure you join us next time. And if you want to share this information with others, be sure and share our Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube and give us that 5-star review if you find this informative on audio and Spotify and those other platforms, audio-only platforms as well. We'll see you next time.